Good evening. Thought I would share a little bit of my testimony tonight. This is Easter Sunday and it's about 6 in the evening. I heard a couple different people today on Facebook sharing their testimony. I thought I'd share a little bit of mine. I grew up in a Christian family. My dad was a preacher and he pastored for a few years while we were growing up. My great grandfather, he pastored the same church for 40 years, but it was about 1971. I was 6 years old, and it was my grandpa's church, but my dad would preach on Sunday nights for him a lot. So he was preaching that Sunday night, and it was not uncommon for my dad to have an altar call. So that night I felt led to go up and pray, and I can say I got saved. Inside of me, it changed so many things, but um, outwardly, someone may have not have noticed the difference, but it changed a lot. It made me think different. But that same year, I took up playing the guitar, and at about 7 years old, I started playing, which uh, we had 7 kids in our family, and most of us all play some kind of instrument growing up in church. That's kind of what you did. But I started playing at 7. Of course, my brother Frank, he played the guitars along with me, and Joe played the drums, John the piano, Phil played the tambourine, Martha played a little piano and would sing, and my sister Susan would also sing. She may be the only one that I know of that doesn't play an instrument in the family. If she does, she can let me know that. But so I grew up. Most of my focus after that was just playing music, growing up in the church. Uh, I grew up in a Pentecostal church. It was, you know, it was not unusual to hear people speak in tongues or people to pray in the altar for hours. And usually, uh, my brother John would be on the piano, Frank and I, and one of us were always up on the platform playing, but I was always up there for sure, and John was, I know. But so we just grew up doing that. We played at youth camp when we'd go to youth camp and played for different events. I never took the spiritual side of things, was never really an interest to me. I was not that interested in learning the Bible, or I was not that interested in spiritual things like speaking in tongues or laying hands on people and praying and doing those types of things. But I can remember we grew up in East Peoria most of that time. That's where the church was. And but later on, when I was about 18, I moved to Tennessee. And while living down there, at the time I was 19, I was going to an Assembly of God church for just a short time. And I'd got involved at that church just because of a music band I was playing in. Some of the people that were in the band went to that church, so I got involved there just for a few months. And while I was there, that would have, I don't know what year for sure that was. I'm trying to think in my head. It possibly was 84, maybe 85. I was either 19, 20 years old. And they all came together to pray one night, the men's group, and there was someone in the hospital, and they said, well, everyone just, uh, you know, have a time of prayer alone, and then we'll all come together and pray. So when they all went down to pray, they were, because of Assembly of God Church, they were Pentecostal, and they were all speaking in tongues, and it was always so annoying to me to not understand, what was being said, and to me it just created confusion. So they were all speaking in tongues, and I tried to pray, and I said, God, I said, I can't pray with all this carrying on. I can't even focus on what I need to pray. And he said, you need what they have. And I said, I don't need what they have. I said, I said, why do I need that? And he said, you need power to pray. And when he spoke those words to me, the next words coming out of my mouth were in a different language. It, it was nothing I could try to make up or anything. I just started speaking in another language, and I could not believe it myself. I mean, I was trying to talk, and I was talking in another language. So when they said, okay, let's all come together now. I couldn't speak in English. It wouldn't lift off of me. Of course, they didn't know that I had never spoken tongues. I usually kept that to myself. I just wouldn't say anything about it. And I didn't pray one prayer that night in English, and I didn't really join in with the prayer, except when I prayed it would be in tongues. And then it finally started lifting off of me, and I was back to normal. I was coherent all the time that this was happening, but it just that's the way it happened to me. A lot of people have different testimonies of many things in life, how we encounter. So that was at 19, 20 years old. I have this experience. So I didn't have another experience. I mean, I wasn't pursuing God. I wasn't, I went to church regularly and was always involved, and I would always, any church I went to, I'd be involved with the music. But it was when I was 25 years old that the Lord encountered me again, and it happened with me waking up out of a dream when I was 25 years old, 1990, and just a real intense presence of God in the room. It was so intense that I didn't know if it was of God or of the devil. I've never felt anything this strong before. I don't even know if it's of God, and I was trying to ask God. I was trying to pray to see if what this was, and I finally told him. I said, "You came to the wrong person." I said, "You should have gone to one of the other family members." I said, "I'm just a guitar player." And when he said that, he said, when I said that, he said, "And I anointed you to play the guitar." And so that took me back in my mind quickly to when I was 6 years old and started playing. I thought I had just picked it up and, it was just kind of a natural thing. I didn't ever think of that was something God had appointed me to do. And so I did ask him, though. I said, if you anointed me to play the guitar, I want you to show me in the Bible. Well, I won't go into all that. I had a lot of visions and a lot of encounters during this. It was a Sunday morning in August. So I'll skip all of that and I'll just go to that part. I got up and went in the living room. It was about 6 in the morning, and I got my Bible out, and I told the Lord I was just going to open it one time, and if he could show me in the scripture that he anointed me to play, then I would receive it. And about the time I thought that, my first wife, she was usually a light sleeper, and if she woke up, then she was up, like she didn't go back to bed. And right when I thought that, she walked in. But when she was walking in, God spoke to me, and he says, "I'm going to put her in a deep sleep." So she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just reading the Bible." And she said, "Okay," which that surprised me. She turned around, and I didn't know for sure what she did. I took my Bible and I opened it up. First time. Opened to 2 Kings, the 3rd chapter, 15th verse. And it says, Elisha called for the minstrel to play. That's in the King James Version. And I had a Dakes, which I still do have, a Dakes annotated Bible. And right there in the footnotes it said, anointed musician. That they were, before Elisha was going to prophesy, they would have the musician to play. And when the musician would play, the Holy Spirit would move upon the prophet to prophesy. So that's the way they would usher in the presence of God. And so that was a big turning point in 1990 that ended up changing the rest of my life, even up to now. So, and what happened is, we were living, and I lived in Tennessee, my dad lived in Mississippi, and I started sharing these experiences with my dad. And in the course of these events, the Lord spoke to me that my dad was supposed to return to where he had left. And this is where he had pastored, was up around, central Illinois, and we were supposed to come back there. And never at any time did I think I would be a preacher or do anything like that. I just thought in terms of music. And so this had such an impact on my dad that he sold his place down there, which he was retired and had settled down. He said that was his little haven of rest, and he sold his farm and moved back to Illinois even before I did. And so the family, we all ended up moving, most of us all back up here in central Illinois area. And my dad ended up finding a building, and the rest of that is history. I was there for 28 years. At one time or another, all the family was at that church, just depending on what time of life they were in, just like myself. And it was, at that place I learned, I developed my gifting to teach and preach and do all these things. My dad mentored me along with other people I looked up to. But so in 91, I had moved back up here. My parents had moved back. And in 92 is when the church opened up. And in 93, then it was turned over to me to be the pastor. So I started pastoring in 93. That's from what had happened in 1990 to 93. Now I'm pastoring. And but a year and a half into it, in July of 94, my first wife passed away just suddenly. It was on a Sunday morning, July 3rd, 1994. She had just sang happy birthday to her mom. It's her mom's birthday on the 3rd. And she had an aneurysm, killed her instantly right there in the house. I heard she was vacuuming that day before we went to church, and I heard the vacuum running, and I went back, and she was in the bedroom, and she was laying on the floor. I thought she had maybe fainted, but when I checked on her, I knew this was bad. And I can say she was in a deep sleep. It was a deep sleep she didn't recover from. So a lot of things, happened during that time. I was having to consider whether I'd stay in ministry or, what I was going to do. And I could rehearse a lot of dreams and visions and things that led up to that moment that the Lord had prepared me for, but I didn't know that He was preparing me for that transition. Many things I've written about, and some of you have probably read over social media at different times, some of my experiences. One of my experiences I will share was I want to say it was May. I had a second cousin that had passed away, and I can't remember the exact date of his funeral unless I was to look it up or ask someone. But when I was in that funeral, I was sitting toward the back, and he was young. He was like 37 years old, and I knew him pretty well. He lived in this area, but his parents were sitting on the front row, my uncle and aunt, and his wife, and he had 2 kids. And I saw these spiral waves coming from the back of them, coming out of them. It's very clear. I could see it. It wasn't any difficulty to see this in the spirit realm. These spirals coming out like a signal. And I'm sitting in a funeral, and I'm not. That's not where you think of being spiritual. But this had happened, and I asked the Lord, I said, what are these signals that they're sending? And he said, well, he said, your heart is always communicating with me. I always know what your heart is saying, no matter what is going on or what you may be saying. I know the truth. I know what your heart is saying. And right now, those real strong signals coming out of them, they're communicating their grief, whether they know it or not. They're communicating, and I hear their heart, and I know exactly what they're going through. I know right where they're at. And I thought, well, that was interesting. Well, I didn't think of it anymore. I probably wrote it down somewhere and just went on. And then, you know, a month and a half later, whatever it was, this happens to me. And I'm not thinking about that vision I had. It was a month and a half, 2 months into my, life on the other side. And initially, I didn't do any preaching. I wasn't involved in ministry. I took like a 2-month sabbatical. And then I decided I needed to, start preaching again. But when I went to try to think about preaching, my mind was just so scattered. Like I couldn't pull two thoughts together. Seemed like I couldn't read the Bible. I mean, nothing had. When I'd open the Bible, it had no meaning to me. Like everything had changed. So it was I remember I told him I'd preach on Sunday, and then here I was Saturday night. I couldn't put two scriptures together, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was laying there in the bed, and I felt someone walk up beside me, and I thought, what in the world? I knew someone just walked up beside me, and I just went ahead and I said, what do you want? So it was an angel of the Lord, and he said, when God sees you, he sees your heart. You can't fool God. But for whatever reason, that I instantly felt better. Like my mind was clear. It was easy to read the Bible again. And for whatever reason, I knew I was going to be okay. And I was. Like the next day, I got up to preach, and I was fine. I had my message, and I never stopped preaching after that. But it wasn't long after that I met Michelle. And I mean, I could go through a whole long story there, but there was just like that we knew of. We had never met ever. Even though her dad was a pastor, I couldn't tell that we had ever met. And after that, it was just like every time we turned around, we were meeting somewhere. And so, to make a long story short, within a year, I married Michelle, my wife now, and we've had 4 kids together. So just to kind of backtrack here, 1990, I have a vision. 91, I moved from Tennessee back to Illinois. 92, we open a church. My dad pastors it the first year. Frank and Joe, Philip are all there. My mom's there. In 93, the church is turned over to me to pastor. In 94, Karen passes away. In 95, I marry Michelle. In 96, Michaela's born. A lot of stuff happened. And in 98, my second daughter Audrey was born. I'm still pastoring. Just a little side note, during that time I was driving a school bus also. I have some stories from that too. But just a little clip of my testimony there. Of course, in 2000, we have Annette. She was born on my birthday. The Lord told us that we had stopped at 2. We decided that's it. So I guess I'm extending this testimony. The Lord spoke to me and said, you're supposed to have another child, and this child will complete the other two. I didn't know if it'd be a boy or girl. I just knew we were supposed to have another one, and so we had another one. We have Annette, and that year that we had Annette, through the death of my uncle, which I've written a lot about, the Lord transitions me into what we know nowadays as the grace message, a Christ-centered message. There's basically three different approaches we can have. We have a spirit, we are a soul, and we're a body. We're spirit, soul, and body. And our body, that's obvious, is what we see. But our soul man is, it's a little different. It's the inner man, your mind, will, emotions, as it's been described. And then our spirit man is what was extinguished when Adam and Eve sinned. Our spirit man, we died spiritually. And so then when everyone that was born of Adam, or we were born into this world, we have a soul and we have a body, but we're separated from God through our spirit man. So the way you know whether you're Christ-centered or not is whether, if you're centered on Jesus, your spirit man is fully alive and functioning. Which is okay to be centered in any of these areas, but to know the difference, that if it's about Christ and the work of the cross and the power of his blood, then you're operating in the spirit. If it's about yourself, and you're self-focused, then that's usually that's your soul man. Your soul man can be trained and informed and conformed and all of those types of things. So we're saved. We're being saved. That's our soul man. We will be saved. That's our body. We'll eventually have a new body. So just a little bit of a description there of your spirit, your soul, and your body. Everybody is born in this world with a soul and a body, but they have the capacity for a spirit, but that place in us that was reserved for our spirit man can only live through God and through his son. So I have to kind of back up here and get back on track with the story that I was trying to tell. So that happened in 2000. So the Lord ushered me into what it means to be saved by grace through faith. And so grace means that Jesus did it all. He paid the price. He conquered sin. And now we just receive it into our spirit man, and we come to life. And we can fellowship with God, come boldly before his throne. So I've spent, then from 2000, that started a whole new journey. That year, I was a songwriter. Before that, I was always writing songs. And my songs were mostly stories, and I still have that type of singing that I do, or writing also. But I started writing worship songs. When I came into grace, I started writing worship songs, because worship songs are all about Jesus. They're exalting him, they're exalting God. They're not about us. They're not about us trying to become something. There's not a longing in our spirit for anything. We have God. We are in God, and God is in us. But in our soul, man, that's where, there can be a gray area, it seems. Like we're longing, we want to feel his presence, and that's all in the soul realm. And then 2001, Jacob was born, and he was a pleasant surprise to us. And Michelle, of course, we both did. We got our son, and he's been a wonderful son to have. And anyway, there's many different paths I could take in trying to share a testimony, but I just wanted to. That's a little clip there of some of my testimony and where I am at now. Sharing on social media is mostly the means by which I communicate. I'm not pastoring anymore after 27 years at that church. that we started way back then with my family, and I pastored it 27 years, was there 28 years. So now, I'm about 6 months out from that, and I'm just communicating through social media. So thank you very much. Blessings.